All right, so welcome today. I'm going to be sharing something called Sowing the Seeds of Lean, maybe because I'm just a fan of 80s music. I wanted to get this earworm in. Can you hear that? You can't hear it? Probably because it's in my. Oh, well. I was trying to play my Tears for Fears music, to get us going. Um, so today, what I want to do then is to give you an overview and some thoughts about how to really continue to either foster the work you're already doing, or if you feel like you're struggling in kind of getting a hold in building a lean culture. Wanted to share some stories and give you an analogy that goes to gardening, just because I was having a lot of fun. So before we get started in the chat, I thought it'd be kind of fun if you could just quickly type in, what is your role? So within your organization, what is your role? We've got training, we've got an engineer, continuous improvement. I don't want to see the variety of performance improvement manager, quality manager. So we got a lot of CI folks. Production supervisor. All right. I'm seeing a slowdown there. Another CI. So we got a lot of CI folks here. Oops. And who else? Let's see. Okay. EHS. All right. Wanted to just get a little bit of a feel for the audience before we jumped in and got going. Okay. So I want to introduce my family to you and share some fun facts. These are my kids. My son is entering as a freshman in high school. He's way into lacrosse and has also decided all of his friends play football, so why not? So he's getting up at 7 a.m. For a couple hours and then going back in the afternoon. So he's really understanding the value of like jumping in, dedicating yourself to something and training. My daughter runs, she plays soccer, and is also in high school. And our family likes to go backpacking. We like to head out into the wilderness for a week with only the packs on our back. It's kind of fun to unplug, especially when you have teenagers and they don't have access to their phones. It's amazing because they can carry on a conversation and they are pretty cool. So if you haven't experienced that lately, finding a way to unplug is kind of fun. So here, I apologize. I've got a screen right in the way there. All right, why did I share some personal information about myself? I did so because lean is about community, trust, and relationships. So how well do you know the people that you work with, the people that you're likely to ask to follow you? Have you encouraged them to share and brag about their kids and their hobbies? Do you see your coworkers as humans or people with skills that are important to the product or the service you're providing? Do they see you as a human or as a boss or project manager? So today I'd like to talk to you about sowing the seeds of lean and share how we can take lessons from horticulture and put them into play in our workplace to help others successfully grow and develop in the direction that we are striving for. All right, so feel free to come off the chat and make fun of me here, but why do you think my plants look like this? Or does anybody else have anything growing in their yard that looks like that? Silence. Okay, I'll just keep moving then. Oh, I've got something coming in message-wise. Old growth being replaced by new growth. Ooh, there's a good analogy there. Oh, Allison, yes, you have the same approach to plant care that I do. Okay, well, there is hope. So stay tuned. All right. All right. So what I'd like to do is just kind of narrate a story to compare my gardening skills to your lean initiatives. Okay, so I purchased something that looks really great in the store. ooh, I want to implement 5S. I set it on my porch. I admire how pretty it is. Wow, I cleaned up that area really well. Look how organized it is. The first few weeks, it looks beautiful. It's still reaping the benefits of the nutrients that were added before I purchased it. Flowers are gorgeous. Things are staying organized for the most part. Everyone who walks by comments on how clean it is. I forget to water it, and it stops flowering. We all thought that someone would step up and keep the area clean. You hear things like, I'm too busy, or that's not my job. Life gets busy, and you stop spending time on your porch and ultimately ignoring the flower. Production picks up. No one is holding us accountable to keep our area organized. I'm used to the tools missing anyway. So we're just back to where we were, which isn't terrible. So this is why, in my mind, the realistic definition of 5S is sort, set in order, shine, see what happens, and start over, or sometimes stop altogether, right? So let's look at this a little bit differently. So why did my plant die? Why did your lean initiative die? And in my opinion, it's likely because you focused on the surface, the pretty shiny stuff that you can see and that you want to implement. But in truth, the magic really happens beneath the soil. So science and human nature go hand in hand. The first thing a gardener must do is prepare the soil. And often they don't even start outside. They create an environment indoors that is better for nurturing and observation, especially in those early stages of growth. And this is what they call sowing the seeds. Sowing simply means to put them where they have a chance to germinate. Timing is really important. For gardeners, they need to understand how long seeds take to germinate and when it's appropriate to plant a particular flower or vegetable. So if your seed is ready to go into the ground, but the ground is still frozen, it's going to be impossible for your seed to grow. I remember the first time that I planted a seed in elementary school. We were so excited to come home with our little Dixie cups and watch our seeds grow. Did any of you do that? It was so hard to wait, right? I checked the cup multiple times a day, just waiting for the first sprout to appear. I wanted to add more water to speed it up, but my mom reminded me that that growing takes patience, and I needed to give it just the right amount of water and sunlight. And when the time was right, I'd start to see the first sprout pop through the soil. There's some important factors for a seed to grow: light, moisture, air, temperature, even the pH of the soil. So you have to constantly monitor these to ensure that the environment is being taken care of. You have to nurture the seeds and be present. You can't just throw them in the ground, walk away, and expect a miracle to happen, kind of like I did with my plant on the porch. Yet that's what happens over and over again with lean implementations. So today we are going to talk about the elephant in the room, because you can't drag the elephant out of the room. It has to decide to leave on its own. Just because you want to change doesn't mean that those around you are ready or willing to change. So if we're going to create a lean transformation, we need buy-in and engagement, because this is ultimately a mindset and a cultural transformation. So quite often, leaders in our organization, and I could be talking about you, they read about an amazing company using an amazing tool to get amazing results. They pull a team together and say, read this, isn't it amazing? It's like rainbows and unicorns and cupcakes. Let's do this. What we fail to recognize is that most books don't mention or uncover the pain and persistence and the secret sauce behind what it took to get people on board. They glaze over it so that they can write about the good stuff, everything that you can see on the surface right now. It's kind of like your Facebook, your Instagram post. When was the last time you posted about how terrible or hard your life was? Usually when you're scrolling through these posts, you just read about cool things that are happening to people. And those are the things that you're sharing as well. So we have to remember that the lean organizations that we've turned to all these years, like the Toyotas, they have very mature lean cultures. The things they are doing today is the result of a lot of work that we can't see, and we often fail to acknowledge it. The first company I went to work for out of college still has one of the leanest cultures that I have ever had the honor of experiencing firsthand. It was everything I read about in the books. So when I switched jobs to another organization with a highly regarded lean culture, with what I thought were some pretty good lean roots, I was disillusioned when I didn't see the same systems and support and buy-in universally across the organization. They had pockets of what we would call a lean culture, but there was also skepticism. It was at this organization that I learned how important that relationships and communications were, and how important it was to move slowly. You can't implement lean overnight. In fact, you shouldn't try to implement lean at all. Lean will not stick unless it is integrated into your organization and people believe in the new way of thinking and acting. So I'd like to get some feedback from you guys in the chat. So how do people or yourself feel when change is done to you or to them? How do people feel? Angry, resistant, frustrating. I'm seeing a lot of resistance. So some of the same things. Oh, it's not as important as they did not involve the team. Very good. You're really looking forward there, Leah. So, typically people will feel alienated or maybe fearful, disinterested or skeptical, apprehensive, worried about what's going on, or even overwhelmed. And so what we need to do is help create awareness for the need to change. And so I want to step into the first step, and that would be preparing the soil. And so the first stage of sowing the seeds is to prepare the soil. And so in a workplace environment, what that means to me is starting with why. I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. So people must first understand the purpose and the intention behind what you are doing and why they should care. You want to be able to clarify and communicate the purpose. So why is the change required? What is the evidence that we even need change? What happens if there is no change? And I think you'd all agree that there are only a small percentage of people who will follow you blindly. Most others will want data and reasoning, and ultimately they also want to participate. So you need to remember to involve others and give them a voice in this. So every human has basic needs: to feel connected, to matter, to have a sense of community. So here's another open-ended thing for you guys in the chat. So how do you or people around you feel when they are included or informed? What are some words that you would describe? So when you're included in a change, when you're informed, how do you feel? Increased buy-in and acceptance, appreciated, engaged, valued, engaged and curious. Oh, I like the addition of curious there. So I had many of the same thoughts, right? I also was thinking about comfortable and secure. And I think along the same lines of the curiosity, is that intrigue, the inquisitiveness. So when people really feel like they're involved in what's going on and part of what's moving forward, we get a totally different kind of person showing up, right? And what we're seeing in how they're responding is so different from when the change was done to them. And we're able to make that transition. So I remember that all feelings are a result of met and unmet needs. So when you are meeting their needs, their feelings are going to change. And so how do you create that desire to participate and support the change? One thing that I like to do sometimes is create a picture. Let people draw. Now, not everybody's fabulous at drawing, but there's, stick figures work. So ask them, how will that outcome look? Ask them to draw a picture of where they think we need to go and what that would feel like if you were able to change your culture and to implement some positive change, either to the culture, to some of the process, and then also about how they will feel. Use some emojis, right? Those can come in really handy. So what I want you to remember, though, is it's not about the tool, right? So, decades ago, it was really about implementing all these fancy things and all these Japanese, that all had Japanese words. But really, we need to realize that it's about getting everyone on the same page. They need to believe in one mission, understand what it takes to get there, and also what their contribution needs to be. So putting systems in place to make it easier to move forward than to move backward, right? I think you've seen the illustration, of the wedge, and as you're doing PDCA and problem solving or whatever that is, you have to you make a little bit of a progress, but you have to put a wedge in it so that we don't slide backwards. So what are those systems that you're going to put in place to help people move forward versus move backwards? And so I would also advise linking to something that is already present in the culture, because otherwise it'll become that flavor of the month. So this is a model that I like to use. Mark will recognize it from our Lean 101 class. But taking that why, what that why does then is it feeds into people's beliefs. You're helping people, you're sharing your beliefs, and you're helping people to have a common set of beliefs that then will ultimately drive different behaviors in the organization. But you also need to have the systems in place to reinforce and support what those are. And these actually go kind of, two directions, right? As you start, as behaviors are changing, you're going to start to also change beliefs. And same thing with the behaviors and systems, and the systems and beliefs. So let me give you an example. If in my personal life, my ultimate goal is to make it to the next stage in my life with energy and to do the things I love, things like spending time with my kids, hopefully some grandkids down the road, spend time outdoors, and be active. And so if that's where I'm striving to be, I believe that a huge part of this is staying fit and fueling my body and my brain. So these are my beliefs. So in order to do that, I know that I need to exercise daily and eat healthy foods. So those are the behaviors that I have to do. And to reinforce these behaviors, I need a system in place. So especially on the, staying active every day, I rely on my Fitbit. You guys might have an Apple Watch. Some of you might use a Fitbit. But here's why. It's a constant reminder of what I've done throughout the day, right? And what I like about a Fitbit is it actually has a balance scorecard. So it's not like, you put a step goal in place and then you can, go out in the first 45 minutes of your day, get the steps behind you, cross it off and say, okay, I'm done. This little thing every hour will beep at me and say, get up and walk around. You need to at least be standing and walking around about 250 steps every hour. It'll also say, oh, you need 15 minutes of really active time every day. So it gets kind of annoying, but it gives me data. It beeps at me. And so it helps reinforce those behaviors, right? So this three-legged stool is just as important for your cultural transformation. So you can't just put a new system in place, but people have to know why and believe in the why. So a lot of times people just go to the base there and, hey, I'm going to implement a new system. But if you haven't really completed this triangle, it's ultimately going to just backslide again. So let's put this in a work example that you may have experienced, an idea system. Have any of you tried to implement an idea system or been a part of an organization where it's like, oh yeah, let's put an employee suggestion system in place? So quite often, the first time this happens, it fails. So you're trying to increase your engagement or save money by making improvements and getting people to give their ideas. So maybe you have a little box set out, or maybe you have an email address, a QR code to collect their ideas. And then you're surprised when it remains empty. Sometimes it even gets forgotten about. It sounds all cool to begin with, and then it's like you totally forget about it because work happens, right? And the whirlwind takes over. So what does this result in? If you say you care about their ideas, but if they start submitting them and nothing happens, they're going to stop sharing them. So, but if you, instead of starting with the system, start with the why. What is that overarching purpose of why it's important to hear their voice? Why it's important to strive towards some sort of a quality goal or an improvement goal? And then you can get them believing that it's important, but then your behaviors in actually following up once they give you those ideas are going to be super important, because otherwise they're just going to say this is a flavor of the month and nobody cares and go back to what they're doing. So one of the things that I like to do is visualize this. So I believe that once you define and communicate your why, it's important to identify the beliefs, behaviors, the environment, and the capabilities that you're ultimately striving to create. So document your current state in those areas and focus on the gap. And then you'll notice that there is a bridge to be crossed, right? And so here's where you're trying to get things like improvement is king. We want contributions to the team. Let's just solve this problem. But then also note where you are today. Let me just do my job. Production is king. I want to hide problems. And so then you can spot really where those gaps are and decide where you want to tackle and what you need to do, what sort of systems you would need to put in place to help support and reinforce new behaviors that you want to have in place as you work towards transitioning into that new environment. So let's talk about step 2, which is the germination. And this is really that transformation stage within the seed, because it is the transition, it's not the change that they resist. So we always talk about change management, but in my mind, it's really transition management, because it's that psychological change that they have to go through, and people go through that at different speeds and for different reasons. So I want to introduce you to something called the marathon effect. It's something that we also teach in our 3H leadership class. Have any of you ever been a part of a half marathon or a marathon? Feel free to come off mute.
No, you might have.
Yes.
Oh. I don't know if Doug was actually saying yes for. Have you been in a marathon, Doug?
Yep. Yes.
All right. Does this picture kind of remind you of the start line?
Yep.
Okay. There's a lot of people there. So when you're standing there getting ready to go and the starting bell or the gun goes off, are you you're going to cross that start line and head off like the second that happens? Doug, what's that experience like?
I was slow enough. I was way at the back, so we walked until we got to the start line.
Okay. So they line people up by speed, right? So they put the really fast people at the front so they can just take off. How long do you think it took before you got to the start line?
I think I was about 10 minutes back.
10 minutes back. Okay. So some of the fastest runners then are already 2.5 miles into the race, right? Or more.
Yeah.
Easily, right?
Yep.
They've already, know what some of the turns look like. They already know what's like, maybe there's a hill that we're climbing, right? But, and I had a similar, I did the Portland Marathon years ago, and I think it took 25 minutes until I got to the start line. So I like this to use this as an analogy with a lot of times leaders are like, wow, this is awesome. I want to get out. We want to go, maybe you've looked at things, you've researched things, you've seen some things, and then you come back to your plant and you're like, we got to do this. And then you can't figure out why nobody else can see the vision and wants to jump on board, right? So this marathon effect is you've been out there running. You cross that start line as soon as the gun went off, and you're out ahead of the game. You've already seen the scenery. Do you know how fast the fastest time that the marathon's been run? 2 hours and 2 minutes. Can you imagine? The average time is 4 hours, right? So within this span of time, the person who won, his name is Eli Kipchoge, and I probably mispronounced that. But 2 hours later, he's already home taking a nap, right? By the time you even get to the finish line. And so if you think about your change and your changes that you're trying to go through in the same way, you have to realize that there are people behind you who haven't had the same experience, and you need to kind of circle back around with them and stand next to them. So you want to build those relationships, you want to establish trust, and start small and see the world through their eyes. Be present at the Gemba. So if you don't know what the Gemba is, that's the place where things happen. It's a very fun Japanese word that I like to use. And so what I would do is spend more time seeing things through their eyes before you move forward. When I first started my career as a manufacturing engineer, I spent most of my day at the Gemba. I would hang out and get to know everyone on a personal level and reinforce how skilled and knowledgeable they were at their job. I wanted to let them know that what they did was important and I cared about them. I would ask them to teach me what they knew and to share openly, what was working well. Because a lot of the times when people don't know or trust us and we go out and say, hey, how are things going? What's the answer you're going to get? Everything's fine. Everything really isn't fine. How do you get people to actually share and be willing to say, you know what, this sucks. I'm struggling. This is not working. I'm frustrated by it. So you need to be able to work to get them to a point where they will share what's bugging with them. They will share with you what is bugging them. They will share ideas that they might have for improvement. When I was in that role, I always like to think of myself as kind of this Santa Claus. I describe like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I'm kind of like Santa Claus. People give me their wishes and I help make them come true. Right? We'll bring them new fixtures or we'll do different things to the line. But it was something that we always did in conjunction. It was never something that I just went out and said, I have this brilliant idea. Now you're going to do it. Right? I learned early on that was not, culturally at the company I was working for, that would not fly anyway. But it was really easy to see that they had to be part of the ideas and part of the change. So this really falls into then the knowledge piece. So helping people know what that change looks like, making sure that there's some sort of a plan, outline steps for releasing, hey, what does this look like? Do we need training? How do we support you as the change happens? People are going to need access to information. They need examples, and they need you to be a role model. You can't just say, we want to do this differently. We're going to streamline this. We're going to one-piece flow. Here's the expectation, bye-bye. And, if they come up with a problem, they're just going to go back to what they did before, or they're going to start hiding things. People are really good, hiding, stashing inventory. Go look in drawers or behind benches and stuff. And it's kind of amazing what you can sometimes find on an assembly line. So help them create that ability to implement the change by building their skills, helping them change their behaviors, give them a part to play. So how can they help with the transition? What is their new role? How do the relationships change? So your role is then to be more of a coach, a mentor, and you need to remove those barriers for them. Oops, there we go. Anybody know what this is a photo of?
Bamboo.
Bamboo, yes. This is a field of giant timber bamboo. And I can say, like, I can just, even looking at the picture, I'm kind of in awe of just how great and mature it is. I can't imagine just standing there in the middle of it looking up, right? And let me just tell you a little bit more about bamboo. So this is over 90 feet tall right now. And literally it does not happen overnight. So when a farmer plants a seed of the giant timber bamboo, they will water it for a full year. And at the end of that year, you'll come back and see absolutely nothing. So he waters it for another full year. And at the end of that year, you will see nothing, still soil. So they water it another full year. And at the end of that year, they will see anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Alexi, what's your guess?
Yeah, probably it's like germinating, probably a starter.
A starter? Nah, we're only at year 3, still nothing. Good guess, though.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then he waters it for another year. And then at the end of that 4th year, that's when the miracle happens. The bamboo breaks through the ground, and in 60 days, it will grow 90 feet tall. 60 days up to 90 feet. After spending 4 years looking at a field of soil and just watering it and believing that something was happening, right? So I will have to say that this is a much more incredible phenomenon than the seedling that I was watering when I was in elementary school, right? So, but that farmer knows that you can't reap what you sow overnight. So you have to have patience. You have to have persistence. All that water was put into the ground was to develop the roots. The roots of the giant timber bamboo are 100 yards deep. You would not want to try to dig around under there, right? But the invisible was happening. So when you just spend time developing your employees or encouraging them to get on board with something new, are you expecting instantaneous change? Or are you comfortable watching for small signs and continuing to nurture them and waiting for that miracle to happen? So step 3 is then to provide the feed and care. So when I started my career, the roots of lean were already very, very deep in the company that I worked for. These ways of thinking and acting, they weren't new. They were embedded, they were reinforced. Systems were in place to ensure that people had a voice. People had an and on and were encouraged to use it. People were motivated to always keep improving. People were not afraid of failure. They just knew that if they kept experimenting and learning, problems would eventually be solved. So the key is to create these initial pockets of people who get it, who embrace it, and are just willing to go for it. And that excitement and energy becomes infectious. So understanding that, like seeds, not all people are the same. They have different requirements. Seeds for survival, people for engagement and growth. Some people have a harder seed coat than others, which takes a little bit more time to soften before they can burst open. They need more water, more attention. So if you're not out at the Gembra every day, preparing the soil, germinating the seeds with the essential elements for growth, and consistently nurturing them and caring for them, your lean initiatives will die, just like my plants do. So if you think of this as a cycle, you're creating an organization of lean thinkers that can then sow and nurture lean throughout your organization. They become the gardener with the watering can, helping your lean transformation grow and flourish. When I came into that company and I was seeing all this on the surface, it hadn't gotten there instantaneously. It was the result of many years, a lot of dedication, and a really strong kind of a North Star. They had defined where they wanted to go, but they started with small groups of people and started to instill those beliefs. And then as their behavior started changing and they had the systems in place to reinforce them, others more and more wanted to be on board because it was easier to work where we were always solving problems, always moving forward than to be in that old way of thinking where even though, hey, we've always done it this way, well, it's always been a pain. And I've always gone home at the end of the day exhausted, right? So how do you create those pockets? We've got Sean here. He had a really great presentation in February that's available on our YouTube channel about them creating a model cell. And that's spread through all of their locations throughout the US where they're able to show, if certain things are in place and working together and the right systems are around there, amazing things can happen. So I want to tell you that even at times where it feels like there's no hope, don't give up. This is actually what my plant looks like this week. So even though it looked dead and had no hope at the beginning of the summer, when I showed that photo, here, I'll even flash to it really quick. That's what it looked like in the summer. The green you're seeing are the weeds that were growing in it. Those are not any part of the actual plant itself. Those were weeds, right? So I put a system in place to water it that was integrated into my morning routine. First, the leaves came back, and then the flowers started to bud. And there's still some dead wood that needs to be trimmed, but it also reminds me of how far that it's come and how patience and persistence has paid off. So I wish you the best as you reflect on your path and start taking the necessary steps to prepare the soil, germinate the seeds, and then feed and care for your people.